Good evening. I'm Jane Turvey, Community Services Coordinator for the Orillia Public Library. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining us this evening for our Scotland travel presentation. This program will be recorded. Please mute all of your microphones and turn off your cameras. We have a rather large audience, so questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And if you could send them in chat, that would be great. Let's hope we can travel again soon, and Scotland is definitely on my list. I am really excited to introduce Samantha Cowan, Outbound Operations Manager for Connection Custom Travel and the Battlefield Tours of Canada. After receiving her bachelor's in tourism management at Ryerson University, Samantha continued her training and guidance as a hiking apprentice in Banff National Park. In 2013, she took on the role of Sales and Program Management for Handa Travel in Toronto, leading travel programs as large as 150 plus to Cuba. She began working with the Connection Tours team in Toronto in 2014, guiding Canadians to the UK, Europe, and Southeast Asia on special interest programs such as the Battlefield Tours of Canada. Today, Samantha resides in Saskatoon, where she writes a host of special interest custom tours for travel agencies across Canada and the US. She also hosts various webinars, as well as the Battlefield Tours of Canada blog and YouTube channel. She also contributes to several podcasts and does presentations both in present and virtually. I am really excited that Samantha has brought a special guest with her tonight, joining us from Scotland. His name is Alistair Grierson, and he is a local tour guide born and raised in Edinburgh. He studied English literature also at the University of Edinburgh and hosts a series of special interest walking tours in and around Edinburgh. Most notably is a whiskey tour that he holds in a private room at the Waverley in Old Town. Please let us welcome Samantha and Alistair.
Yay! Thank you. Thanks for having us. This is really great. We have a presentation for you. So Daniel, do you mind making me the host and I'll share my screen?
So you should be able to go ahead and share screen now.
Awesome. I very much can. Woohoo, woohoo. Okay, bear with me, everybody. Let's start sharing. You guys see my desktop there?
Yeah, looks good. Looks good.
Great. All right, here we go. So thank you again for having us. We're so excited to be talking about Scotland. You know, travelers are putting a lot of thought into where they go on their travels on these post-COVID trips. And, you know, without having the immediate access to explore the world that we once had, planning is becoming more intentional. And I think as a society, I think what we're really learning is that travel should be treated less as a right and more of a great privilege. And the message, of course, today for Canadian travelers is still to stay safe, stay at home. But for those who are aching to travel again, like we are, this time at home makes for a great opportunity to really delve into a destination, you know, learn all you can so that when the skies open up again, you'll have such a better comprehension of the explorations you're looking to set off on and a better appreciation and understanding of what you're seeing. And hopefully after this conversation, a better connection with the destinations you aim to travel to. Like Jane said, my name is Samantha. I've been working with Connection Custom Travel and Connection Tours and Outbound Operations coming up on 8 years now. And my friend and colleague is joining me so graciously, so late at night, Alistair Grierson. It's so great to have one of our trusted suppliers and colleagues with us. A real local is what we needed for this presentation. So I'm happy that he's helping me with this. And throughout this presentation, what you'll see are these beautiful images we have of Scotland, and we won't really have a lot of time to delve into each picture. So what you'll see in the corner is that we've got these little FAQs here. And after the presentation, there will be a link to download this presentation for free so that you can explore these images, explore some of the links that we have in this presentation. It'll be yours. to have and to hold. But let's get right into it. First of all, we're going to be talking about what your connection to Scotland is. Why is Scotland important, and why is that Canadian and Scottish connection important? We're going to talk about why Connection Tours love Scotland, why it's one of our top destinations to travel with. And then we'll launch into our top 5 favorite things. So we'll be talking about one of our favorite hotels, one of our favorite unique stays, one of our favorite experiences, or a few of our favorite experiences, our favorite battle, because of course we do represent the Battlefield Tours of Canada, and we have battlefield programs to Scotland, and our favorite place in Scotland. After that, we have a gift giveaway, so stick around to the very end because everyone will get a little gift of some sort, and there will be additional resources that we'll provide at the end of this presentation as well. First of all, we're Connection Custom. We're a tour wholesaler. So we work with travel agencies across Canada to provide resources so that they have the right information to discover, inspire, and create their own programs to Scotland. So I very much work within the travel industry to educate and promote certain countries. We work directly with these destinations. So we work with Great Britain, Europe, Southeast Asia, and Costa Rica. And we provide, again, resources to connect suppliers to the travel community and create custom journeys that are specially designed for Canadian travelers. The public very much know us for one of our most prominent products, which is the Battlefield Tours of Canada. And that's been a product of ours. We've been working with Canadian veterans and local communities across the Canadian battlefields around the world since 1986. So we've been around a little while. But what's most important to you and what's most important to this presentation is that Connection Tours and Connection Custom Travel really prides itself on supporting local. We work directly with suppliers that support local communities, and we're also Visit Scotland sponsored. So we represent the Tourist Board Visit Scotland in Canada, which means I get to use all their resources, their maps, their connections, their links, all that fun stuff to get more resources into Canada. But of course, why is Scotland important to Canada? Why are these two countries so directly related? And I think it really stems down to the fact that 20% of Canadian residents claim Scottish descent. That's a huge, huge number. And it's come up with all these different associations that we've got in Canada to support this link between the Scottish ancestry that we have. We've got ScotCan, we've got the Canadian research groups, the CASOC, which is the Canadian Society of Scottish Clans and Organizations, and all these different groups are in Canada to create and explore and strengthen business ties between the two countries and create opportunities in a spirit of entrepreneurship and friendship. So there's really a lot of great links in Canada as well, a lot of organizations supporting Scottish culture. We also have the Highland Games here in Canada as well. The largest Highland gatherings outside of Scotland are here in Canada. You've got the Victoria Highland Games, tons of Highland gatherings in Ontario as well. They're very, very important to our culture here in Canada as well. I also wanted to bring attention to these Canadian Scottish regiments, because what's interesting about Canada is that we did bring these military traditions from Scotland to Canada, and they really have come to life. So we have the Canadian Scottish Regiment on Vancouver Island in Victoria. We have the Black Watch of Canada, which is a direct descendant of the regiment in Scotland. And what's interesting about Canada is that our Scottish regiments still wear the kilt today. That's a really, really special and unique tradition that Canada has brought and celebrated from Scotland. We also have Scot Dance Canada. Many people might not know this, but the best Highland dancers in the world are in Canada. We've got a lot of Nova Scotians who go over to Scotland every year and continuously win gold at the Cowal Highland Gathering. So we have a lot to be proud of as Canadians, and with that strong Canadian and Scottish connection. Why do we love Scotland though? There's a lot of different reasons. I'm just going to name a few, but some of the reasons why I personally love Scotland is because we have the right to roam in Scotland. You can walk wherever you like. Scotland is a hiker's haven. There's challenging hills and breathtaking views. It's really a hiker's paradise, but also there's a strong genealogy and ancestry to Scotland, as I mentioned before, 20%. And these resources, information, and this meticulously well-preserved record is in Scotland. Families can come back to Scotland, and from all over the world, they can retrace their ancestry here in Scotland. And this picture is the inside of the National Archives of Scotland in Edinburgh, where you can go with that's really where you can start your family research and learn more about your family tree. Ancient history lives in Scotland. Clues of an ancient history can be found all throughout Scotland, and echoes of a people in a past that have long been since lost. And it's really quite magical because, you know, you've got these standing stones in the Hebrides or the Brochs of the Shetlands. It's all, you can touch it and you can feel it. It's tangible stuff. But what's interesting, and we could go on about ancient history all day, I'm sure Alistair could too, but the history here is really interesting because it goes so far back. It's so in depth, and yet there's some things we know about the history that are still mysteries, like the Scottish Picts and the people who build these standing stones. We don't know much about them, but the clues are so tangible. It's really breathtaking if you're interested in history. Distillery and brewery. Scotland is driven to craft beer and outstanding gins and exceptional single malt whiskeys, and all with even greater visitor experiences. It brings together the best people, natural ingredients, equipment. There's distillery tours all across the country. Every single one is unique. There's small ones, big ones. This one is the Glenlivet here in front of us. It's been a distillery that's been operated continuously since 1824. There's a lot to see and do if you're looking at distillery and brewery. It's also the home to the game of golf. Scotland is definitely the place where golf was born, and the variety and the beauty and originality of each course throughout the country reveals its story. They incorporate stunning courses all over the place. And, you know, people have in their head that it's going to be one of those prestigious links courses, but there's some courses out there that, you know, for example, in front of you, Dunfermline Golf Club. This golf club is 600 years old. And what's even better is you don't need reservations on Sunday. Any visitor is welcome. So there's all different types of golfing itineraries if you're an avid golfer. The home of the Highland Gathering is Scotland. The Cowan World Championships, for example, is the largest Highland gathering in the world. It was first held in 1894. And this event is steeped in history and tradition and fun. These games are so much fun. They can last 2 to 4 days, sometimes overnight. And it's a really great way to mix and mingle with the community and have a ton of fun. I can't stress enough, Highland gatherings are a ton of fun, both in Scotland and in Canada, by the way. Scotland is also home to the finest street in the world. And what's amazing about this picture is that this isn't the street that the famous English writer of the 17th century, Daniel Defoe, famously describes as the finest street in the world. The street he's talking about when he says finest street in the world is actually the street behind the street that you're looking at. So that's just got to give you a really great idea of what the Royal Mile is like. The architecture of this area is just so phenomenal. Edinburgh is definitely a living, walking museum. Finally, though, this is the place of the world's best storytellers. The world's best storytellers live in Scotland. The city of Edinburgh, for example, is a World Heritage Site, and it was the first to be declared as a UNESCO City for Literature. What I love most about this picture, though, is these three women that you see in the middle here. did not want to go on this Lagavulin demonstration tour. They weren't a fan of Scotch and distillery, but it just goes to show, I love this picture so much because it just goes to show how animated the brewing staff are. You know, you can be talking about something as simple as distilling whiskey, but they bring story, life, and passion to it. It's a lot of fun. Now I want to go into our top 5 favorite things. And the first thing I want to talk about is what my favorite hotel is. My favorite hotel in Scotland was really hard to pin down, but I wanted to bring attention to the Love at Loch Ness. And this hotel is based in Loch Ness in a town called Fort Augustus, so just on the south side of Loch Ness. And it's stone's throw away from the cruise you can take to see the Loch Ness Monster, maybe. It's right down by the Caledonian Canal. It's a breathtaking place. But what I love most about this Victorian building is that the owners of this property, it's a family-run property, but the owners are the ones that you see when you first enter the doors. They are so passionate and loving people. They take such great care of their property. And I've done tons of stuff with this hotel. We've had yoga retreats here where they've taken out all of the tables and chairs and we use their whole backyard. The chef of this hotel, what he loves to do, and he's part owner, by the way, but what he loves to do is he likes to take out the guests from the hotel and take them out into the hills to help him forage for the foods that he's going to use in their menu that night. So you can go with him and they're quite extensive walks, but you forage for mushrooms and other forest vegetation, and then you eat it that evening. These two people who run the Love at Loch Ness are so well ingrained in their community. They support local. They even they're so eco-conscious. They actually give discounts to anyone who decides on alternative transportation up to Fort Augustus. So if you take a public bus or you bike, or you could even hike through the Great Glen Way to this hotel, and they'll give you a generous discount for the efforts for you to get up there. So just wanted to bring a spotlight to them. I have a few other places I want to show you before I give this over to Alistair to tell us his favorite experience. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is unique stays, because Scotland is full of really cool places to stay, not just hotels. So the first place we see in front of us here, this is Beach Bay Cottages on the Isle of Lewis, and it's an eco-friendly holiday home. It's designed in Neolithic style from natural stone. It's got a turfed roof. But what's cool about it, and you can't see in this picture, but inside is a 180-degree bay window that allows an incredible amount of natural light to come in. And it also shows such an amazing view of the bay. And the bay changes based on temperature, weather, light, and time of day. So you're always getting a different view. This is such a special little place that not a lot of people know about. What's really lovely is inside there's a multi-fuel stove to keep everybody warm on colder evenings. There's underfloor heating throughout this property to give you a sense of cozy, contemporary style. But what's also cool about this place is there's an infrared sauna inside and a jacuzzi whirlpool bath. So this is, again, just a really unique property that's off the beaten path that you wouldn't necessarily see on a travel aggregate. This is very much a local property that's working with a local family on the ground. Other unique stays, though, I wanted to bring attention to lighthouses. There's tons of lighthouses you can stay in Scotland. A lot of people don't know that you can stay in a lighthouse overnight. I personally have stayed in this lighthouse many times. This is Sunburn Head in the Shetlands, in the Shetland Islands. And their lighthouse keeper's cottage sleeps 5 people. They've also got a visitor center, engine rooms, radar huts, but most impressively is you walk up and explore the lighthouse itself. The lighthouse is still a working lighthouse, and people still work here constantly. The cottage itself is a 2-level cottage, and you're steps away from the RSPB Nature Reserve, where you can see tens of thousands of seabirds in the summer. It's also a perfect place to see famous puffins, as they're known locally. We all know that's a big image in Scotland. Also, there's harbor seals and porpoises that you can see a lot of the times. Killer whales. I once saw a killer whale at this lighthouse, so it's a very cool place to stay. Can't talk about Scotland and unique places without talking about a castle. So here's just one example of literally hundreds of castle stays that I can think of. Now, this one's more on a luxury end. This is more high end. I think everyone should have a warning for Canadians, especially when it comes to castle stays. They're a bit drafty. They're not as modern and as comfortable a stay as you think it would. There's no elevators to get anywhere. There's a lot of stairs. You know, given these castles' ages, you won't see any straight lines in the building. Everything's kind of a little bit quirky. But if you're into that, I recommend places like Knock Old Castle, because you do get that quirky, whimsical, unique accommodation, but it also has the comfort of having, you know, a wood fire stove inside and carpets and creature comforts. What's also cool about this specific castle is this is a really great property for kids. The whole place sleeps 8. And for children, it's really fun to explore because there's 3 turrets, and there's also a wildflower roof where sheep actually come on the roof and graze at the flowers and grass. So it's a really cool accommodation. But also for children, there's a scavenger hunt amongst the interior stained glass windows. So around the property are stained glass windows, and children have to hunt for Baloo the bear. It's a really whimsical, again, property is the best thing to come to mind. My last out of all my unique stays is the tree houses in Lanrick. This is just outside Trossachs National Park, which is about 5 minutes away. But these are unique tree houses in the Trossachs, and there's 5 different kinds. They're all connected by a series of rope bridges. But despite it being a treehouse, you should know that this is a high-end luxury 5-star accommodation. They have wood-burning stoves within, luxury fabrics, super king beds within each property. And what's really cool is that the tree houses were carefully crafted from a homegrown timber. It's really rich and intricate detail, really, really cool property. So that's just a smattering of my favorite unique stays. Again, a lot of people are going to be looking more and more at self-catering options. We're seeing that a lot in Scotland. I highly recommend it. But I would say that if you're looking at booking any kind of unique property like this, you should be booking well ahead of time because there's a lot of demand to see these places. To be honest, we are really looking at 2023 when it looks to booking availability for a lot of these properties. So a big warning there. But I'm going to leave it to Allie now, I think. Alistair, do you mind butting in and telling us about your favorite experience?
No, not at all. Though I was going to frame it as telling you one of my favorite stories from an experience, because the experience in question is my own whiskey tour, and it seems somewhat arrogant to then say that the best experience you could possibly do in Scotland is mine. It is a lot of fun. You wouldn't be guaranteed to get me. You'd get one of 4 guides if it ever starts up again, because obviously being an activity indoors in a pub, it will be one of the last things to reopen, unfortunately. But let's not go there. And the format is you get a taste 4 single malt Scotch whiskies from 4 of the 6 regions. And in between, you'll be told a bit about how whiskey's made, a bit about the history, and then we tell stories, all of which are related to, if not whiskey and the history of whiskey in Scotland, at the very least to alcohol and drinking. And slight spoilers here, because this is the story I would normally close the tour on. And it may start to sound familiar to some of you. So first off, a very, very, very brief Scottish geography lesson. All you need to know is on the west coast, you can picture it. You've got that ripped, rugged coastline and chain of islands. Things are a lot smoother on the east coast. So in the west, those islands are divided mainly into two groups called the Inner and the Outer Hebrides. The largest of the Outer Hebrides is the confusingly named Lewis and Harris. And I say confusingly named because it's one island, but has two names, which can throw somebody off. And to the west of Lewis and Harris, sitting out in the sea, is a tiny little island called Eriskay. And there's really not much on Eriskay, there never has been. They're only really known, they're only famous at all for one reason, the one notable thing that's ever happened on Eriskay. And that was a shipwreck, the SS Politician. So in February of 1941, yeah, there you go. There's Lewis and Harris there, if you want to point to them, Sam. North. There we go. And then Eriskay is one of the wee ones off to the west. So February of 1941, the SS Politician set off from Liverpool in England, going to New Orleans in the US, and didn't make it very far. They managed to ground themselves on the rocks just off Eriskay. Now, February 1941, of course, you will all be thinking that is right into the heart of the Second World War. You may be aware that everything in Britain during the war years was incredibly strictly rationed. So your food, your fuel, your clothing, of course, and rubber as well, things like the tires for your car, your bicycle, the soles for your shoes, and also, sadly, tragically, alcohol was rationed. And not just rationed, it was diluted. So if you were used to going out and having a proper party on a Friday or a Saturday night, at a time when you're probably feeling more demoralized than usual anyway, and then you get there and you're only allowed a handful of drinks and they've been watered down, it wasn't very popular. We were still making the full strength whiskies, pre-diluted. They didn't get done at the source because there was this huge market to sell them to the States and Canada, and you needed any kind of income you could get to maintain a war economy, to the extent that working in distilling, if your key role in distilling counted as a profession that could mean you didn't have to, you could argue against conscription if you wanted it. It was a protected profession, that's the word I'm looking for. So the politician set off from Liverpool with this cargo hold full of whiskey and then smashes onto the rocks at Eriskay. And the locals gather out in this wild stormy day and they see this ship in distress and they're obviously concerned. And then they see ropes and ladders going over the side, the lifeboats are lowered and the crew rows ashore. And they meet them there and give them hot cups of tea and warm blankets. And they ask the captain, say, are you all right? Is everyone okay? And the captain does a quick head count. Aye, we're all here, and I don't think anyone's even badly hurt by some miracle, just a few bumps and bruises. Because the ship, though, she's not going anywhere. And I reassure him and say, well, look, the important thing is you're all alive. There'll be other ships to sail, and you're all here to sail them. He says, aye, I suppose you're right. It seems like such a waste. What do you mean? He says, well, our cargo sat out there. We've got 24,000 cases of single malt Scotch whisky. How many did you say? 24 cases. Undiluted. Right, let's get you through somewhere warm. Hamish, why don't you tuck him through in that room through in the back over there, you know, the one with no windows. Eriskay was and is a small fishing community, which means that absolutely everybody on the island either had a boat or had very easy access to one. And so as soon as darkness fell, there were all the locals gathering together to sail or row out there just to desperately try and save whatever they could, sort of like an alcoholic Dunkirk. And pretty soon everyone was getting involved with this. And the police were turning a blind eye because they were locals as well. I'm sure even if they couldn't get directly involved, they were certainly taking the odd bottle of friends and family. And within days, everyone on the island and the surrounding islands and the nearer parts of the mainland was in a constant state of drunk, hungover, or both. But one man was not getting involved. one man, the local customs officer, Charles McCall. He did not view this as salvage, as the locals were euphemistically referring to it. No, McCall saw this as theft, and what's worse, theft from the government in a time of war. As far as he was concerned, you might as well be taking the bullets straight out the soldiers' guns. I've not managed to find a photo of McCall ever, but I've developed a clear mental picture of him. I'm picturing a sort of short, red-faced, angry little man of the kind that we have all met at least once in our lives. If you're very lucky, you've only met one McCall. It's unlikely they were a friend. They were more likely a colleague, perhaps a customs officer, a border officer. But regardless, he started a campaign to put a stop to this. And the police were initially quite reluctant to get involved because they saw it's harmless, and also they knew it was their friends and family they're going to be investigating. So they did develop a habit of walking very, very slowly when going on their raids. People got adept at hiding at places. I mean, pretty sure it wasn't enough to have it in the back of the kitchen cupboard, but you can get inventive. You can bury it, you can wrap it up and sink it in the sea. Some people would shove it into the thatch, the very roofs of their cottages, of their crofts, and hide it that way. And if the worst came to the worst and you got caught unawares and you saw McCall's squad shuffling across the fields towards you, you could just drink it. I mean, okay, you could pour it away, but that might be a bit of a waste. So there's a fairly common occurrence when McCall's officers turned up at somebody's house to inspect it, to find them supporting themselves heavily against their doorframe, broken glass littering the floors, saying, "Nothing to see here, Ossifer." Though they did manage to catch 5 men. McCall quickly realized that the hold of the ship was flooded with motor oil. And so they got in this rather cunning way. If they just went round people's cupboards, and if they couldn't find any whiskey, then check for clothing. And sure enough, if they've got the bottom of their trousers are coated in oil. So when the word of this got out and the men being prosecuted, as McCall pushed for the harshest penalties he could with a reluctant judge, the men of the island, they came up with a really good solution. They borrowed their wives' old summer dresses. So it's one of the reasons I love this story. It just tells itself. Just this image of these big burly Highlanders rowing out in the middle of the night through a storm, dressed in drag, and their wife's old thin cotton summer dresses, so they can just roll it up and throw them away at the end of their mission. So this went on for a couple of weeks until McCall went out to the wreck and actually inspected the damage for himself. And when he got down into the hold and realized that of those 24,000 cases, 22,000 were now gone. That was the last straw. He obtained permission from the government to rig the ship with explosives and blow it up. And as the locals watched this from the beach, there was this mixed atmosphere. I mean, there was anger, of course. There was incredulity. There was also a fierce pride as they looked across the waves as the ship detonated, arms folded, and said, "Do you know what? We already drank most of it anyway." Ta-da, the end. Samantha.
That was pretty good. Yeah, I was still muted. Sorry, I was saying a bunch of stuff. That was great. That was great. And guys, I'll definitely provide a link to that book that Allie's referencing there.
Oh God, yes, I forgot the punchline. Yes, it was later made into a book and a film called Whiskey Galore.
That's right. That is the punchline.
Well done, me. World's finest storytellers, folks.
Teamwork.
Yeah,
It's true. They are. Thank you again. Thank you for that wonderful story. And again, we have a wonderful picture of Alistair here on our screen, working with one of our groups with a bunch of Highland dancers in Edinburgh before the world closed down. Remember those days?
vaguely.
I have a few other experiences that I want to tell you guys about before I pass the floor back to Alistair. One of the things I wanted to talk about is not so much for entertainment value as it is back to the practicality that I can't help but have for you as a tour operator. As Canadians, I have a bit of a warning. It is difficult to get around Scotland. Public transit will only take you so far. The roads are really windy, very narrow. Car rentals are very expensive. There are very big security deposits that go with car rentals. They prefer standard driving over automatic. They're driving on the opposite side of the road, and there's roundabouts instead of four-way stops. So none of this to deter anyone from renting a car, because we do encourage that people to get out on the road and do self-catering holidays with their family. We do have a lot of travelers that do rent cars. However, I would recommend that more experienced drivers take on that task. If you're looking for more of a peace of mind, though, there is a great way to get around that's not as expensive as people think. People think that this is more of a luxury service, but it really isn't. Little's Chauffeur and Drive is a company that we love to work with, and they're based in Scotland. They have chauffeur drive services all over the world, but they're a Scottish company, and they're a family-owned company in Scotland. So their bread and butter is their own backyard. And Little Chauffeur is not just a chauffeur drive, it's an experience in and of itself, because the drivers are also guides, and they come with all their different types of specializations. And here's Danny in the corner here. I just wanted to bring attention to him because he's a wonderful driver with Little's, one of many, and he loves to specialize in whiskey as well. But the reason why I wanted to bring up this chauffeur drive company is because they're doing a lot to provide a better service that's happier and healthier for all. So their main mission this year has been in sanitization, but their main mission always has been sustainability. So they focus very much on having an eco fleet. 40% of their fleet is eco-friendly. But what's also really interesting is they've completely changed their air filtration within all their vehicles and their generators and their garages. They all use ozone technology, which is kind of like a breath of fresh air in the way it changes the air every 15 minutes. And I guess like that's one benefit of COVID-19 is that this ozone technology won't go away. And it means that we can breathe happy and healthier air for all moving forward. And really, I have seen these in action. We use these on all of our coaches now, and I've got to smell it, and it is really fresh air. So this is that's a great plus when it comes to a chauffeur drive experience or a coach experience in Scotland. A few of the other favorite things I wanted to talk about is the National Piping Center in Glasgow. This is a cool place, especially for Canadians. I like to go here first when I step off the airplane. A lot of the direct routes to Scotland from Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary are into Glasgow. And I like going straight from the airport to the National Piping Center because I can always get a really hot cup of tea and welcomed by a wonderful staff. I'm right in the heart of Glasgow, right down by the shopping street. And again, it's the National Piping Center. It's the first place you can go to hear the bagpipes, and you can try playing the bagpipes for yourself if you like. They also have a hotel at the National Piping Center. It's really small, but I've stayed there myself, and it's again just a really cozy, warm, wonderful environment if you're looking for a Scottish culture as soon as you step off that airplane. Another really cool experience is, this video always loads slow. Oh, it worked. That's great. This is Neil's sheepdog operation. He has a working sheep farm in Aviemore, just outside of Aviemore, which is kind of like Scotland's version of Banff. This is where their skiing holidays are. It's a beautiful area of Scotland, but just off the highway, you can go meet Neil. And what Neil does is he demonstrates how his sheepdogs work, but he also teaches, more so educates the public on the importance of fleece and how it sustains Scotland's economy. He talks about the spinners, weavers, and dyers of Scotland and why textiles are so important. And he kind of translates this old tradition into modern day life. How is his sheep farm continuing to contribute to textiles today in the fashion industry? It's a very interesting job, but you can also learn how to shear the sheep. He gets one brave soul out of the group to shear the sheep. And if you're not interested in shearing sheep, it's just interesting to see how these sheepdogs operate. And you can also cuddle with all of his little puppies afterwards. So I love this place, and it's one of a few. There are a few different sheepdog demonstrations and working farms across Scotland where we've just connected with these people and we said, you know, we've got little small groups coming. Can we just come see how these operations work? And it's fascinating. It's really, really cool. And Neil is an interesting character because he's been working at this farm for so many generations. It's a generational farm. And you can see in the background there's a highway. That highway is new. And he talks about not just the impact of having that highway there, but he talks about the impact of climate change. Little things we haven't even thought of, like the wind direction in Scotland changes. And he brings us all together into a story where we really can appreciate Scotland's economy, Scotland's tradition, and why Scotland is so progressive when it comes to environmental initiatives and changes. It's a really, really interesting experience, and again, one of many. We're going to talk about battlefields. I don't know, Alistair, did you want to talk about the battle, your favorite battle with us now?
Yes. What's the alternative? I thought that was the plan.
Sure. Okay, we'll stick with that plan. I mean, I could throw it to you. Happy to throw you into it.
Sure. Drop in at the deep end. Going for it.
Okay, great.
So Sam has asked me to talk about, well, obviously a battle, for those of you who can read and hear. I'm going to slightly cheat because we're going to focus on one battle and then do a bit of a coda on a second battle, but it's a brief second battle, don't worry. So William Wallace, now you may well have come across this name. You may have heard of the man, even if it's just by his stage name of Mel Gibson. And apologies to anyone watching if you think you've got a good solid background in Scottish history and know about this story from watching Braveheart, because I'm afraid they got just about everything wrong in just about every way, including his name, because William Wallace wasn't Braveheart. That was Robert the Bruce after him. So that tiny little detail. I mean, it's sort of like if you were to, yeah, that's the lad. It'd be sort of like if you were making a biopic about Sir John A. Macdonald and you called it Trudeau. But anyway. So a bit of background. Some of you, I don't know if this is going to be earth-shattering news to anyone, but Scotland and England have not always got along. Sometimes we've had squabbles which have even resorted to fisticuffs. Basically, a Germanic tribe called the Angles landed to fill the power vacuum of the Roman Empire, leaving in the 5th century. And within a year of landing in England, it had a massive fight with the sort of early people that would come together to be the Scots, and just never really stopped for hundreds of years. That lasted until 1237, when Scotland and England finally managed to agree a border between the two countries, instead of fighting endlessly over the same little group of counties that they had done for hundreds of years. And that caused something unprecedented. There was ongoing peace for 60 whole years, until Alexander III of Scotland went and did something incredibly stupid. Alexander went out riding his horse at night in a storm when he was very drunk, because he wanted to see his queen. And he rode that horse straight off a cliff and broke his neck. His only living heir was his 3-year-old granddaughter. And a 3-year-old female monarch was not Scotland's ideal choice for the throne, but it was also our only choice. So she was summoned over from where she was in Norway and then sadly died on the voyage over. So the Scots, like high nobility, squabbled and argued amongst themselves for 2 years without being able to agree, because everyone just kept voting on one of their own guys, until they decided they'd probably need a referee here to move this forward. And probably a smart move, but what's not so smart is the man they picked for the job. They invite Edward I of England, Edward Longshanks, a man who would go on to earn himself the nickname the Hammer of the Scots. So your ideal impartial judge, in other words. And Edward basically rides north, stopped just short of the border, and was like, I think it'll be more fun if I'm king instead. So he installed this puppet government. And when the puppet governor, a guy called John Balliol, displeased Edward, he just said, right, the pretense is over. He invaded Scotland, started occupying the place, stealing everything he can, as well as all of Scotland's holy relics, the national records, and the big rock that our kings traditionally sat on to be crowned, called the Stone of Destiny. And the idea was you remove anything that makes Scotland legally a country. And this obviously led to some discontent, which then quickly developed into open rebellion, and William Wallace was at its head. And we don't really know much about William Wallace. We know he wasn't a poor farmer. He wasn't a crofter like in Braveheart. He was a minor nobility. Wallace sort of explodes onto the scene in May of 1297. He assassinates the sheriff of a town in central Scotland called Lanark. 4 months later, he's still on top of that hill, exactly where that tower is, leading the Scots army. So to what would be a very surprising victory, spoilers, at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. So the battle was saw Wallace and his sort of deputy, who may have actually been the sort of chief tactician, a guy called Andrew Morey. And they were sat up there because they had perfect view of the battlefield. The English army gathered on the other side of the River Forth down below, led by the Duke of Cressingham. Cressingham was absolutely despised throughout Scotland for his brutality and his taxes and his greed. He was this gigantic, notoriously fat man in a time when you didn't really get that many fat people. You had to be obnoxiously rich to be Cressingham's size. And Wallace and Morey are looking confused because they've been up since dawn, their men are gathered, and the English army's just sat there far beyond their normal. And eventually it started straggling and crossing over Stirling Bridge. Now the River Forth is this fairly deep, fast-moving, wide river. And the bridge is the only crossing point for 15 miles, or was the only crossing point for 15 miles in either direction. And it sits at a loop in the river. So it's like an omega symbol or horseshoe. And it's right in that peak, right where it curves in. And the Scots are waiting at the neck of that loop, waiting for it to fill up with English troops. And sure enough, the English eventually start advancing. And then they stop, and there's a lot of shouting, and they go back. And Morey and Wallace are stood in the hill going, what the hell is going on here? What they don't know is Cressingham has indulged himself with a very large meal and several bottles of wine the night before, and he slept in for the battle. His commanders have not been able to wake him, so eventually they've taken matters into their own hands and ordered the troops to advance. Cressingham has then awoken and, furious that these men have acted without his orders, in a petty, childish display, there we go, well found, Sam, he orders his men to come back so he can order them over on his terms. So it's very late in the day by the time the English actually start to manage to advance their heavy cavalry over. Wallace is badly outnumbered by about 2 to 1. He's about 2,500 men to around 6,000 English, and he's got barely any cavalry. What he does have are pikemen, these men on foot with these huge, long, spiked wooden posts. And they start gathering and blocking the neck of this loop. Now, the English are starting to get a little bit worried at this point because they've suddenly realized that this looks like a very easy place for the Scots to hold, particularly because however hard you kick a horse with spurs, it's not going to throw itself onto a giant wooden spear, never mind a wall of them. Also helps, the English hadn't realized, because they failed to do proper reconnaissance, that that neck there is a little boggy marshland and the horses are wearing heavy armor. They won't go through it. But more and more horses, more and more thousands of cavalry are coming across this bridge and filling it up. And when there's not room for anyone to maneuver, the Scots start advancing in with the pikes and things start to get very crushed and claustrophobic. The men at the back, closest to the bridge, realize they're about to be cut off. So they turn and try and go back over the bridge. But the English heavy cavalry is still advancing. And in the mess and the confusion and the weight of all these men and horse and armor and arms, this wooden bridge just collapsed, went into the river, and suddenly all of these English horsemen are trapped. The archers on the other side, they can't do anything because they know they're just going to hit their own men. So they have to just watch as the Scots go, stabbing people, stabbing them off their horses, and eventually just slipping between them, pulling people off to the ground and then stabbing them on the ground. It's absolute slaughter. It said the river ran red for 2 days. Cressingham panics because he realizes his heavy troops have been wiped out and the Scots have basically lost a handful of men, and he starts fleeing. Now, remember, it's going to be 50 miles to catch the next crossing, and they've both got armies to maneuver, but Wallace catches up with him just south of Edinburgh. At which point he had Cressingham turned into an accessory, said, well, look at all that skin he's got, I'd be ashamed to waste it, and had him flayed and turned it into a sword belt and a belt and a scabbard, sorry. Which he wore as he did the traditional thing of when you had a victory against the English, you raided down into England. And these were pretty brutal times, and Wallace had not much mercy by him. He spared women and children, but slaughtered every man he found as far as York. York seemed to be like a good stopping place, you know, like if you're going on a long journey and you all like one you do regularly and there's always that same place you stop for lunch. That was basically York in the Wars of Independence. Like, you know, you ain't got about as far as York. That's respectable enough. You can turn around and go home. Obviously, Edward wasn't very happy with this, and he sent this furious army out, this reprisal force, where Wallace met the next year, the Battle of Falkirk in 1298. And that was where we get the beginning and the end of Wallace's successes, because he had those two battles. He had a stunning, resounding victory, followed by a stunning, catastrophic defeat. He was doing okay until halfway through the battle, the English managed to separate the Scots infantry from their archers. And then at that point, the cavalry, which Wallace actually had this time, just turned around and galloped off over the hill and abandoned them. And nobody's really sure why. If they thought with the archers out the game, it was a lost cause, so there was no point, might as well save ourselves. Did they betray Wallace? Was it political factions? But whatever, the result was Wallace's cavalry turned around, galloped into the distance, his archers were out the picture, and suddenly all you've got are these helpless men on foot who, okay, are hard formation to pass, but the English then just sat on the sides and picked them off with archers until there were none. Wallace, meanwhile, he fled. He went into this he resigned as Guardian of Scotland, this honorific role, his title he'd been given after Stirling Bridge. Went into sort of a self-imposed exile in France, and you see a bit of that with the French princess in Braveheart. You've got to hope they didn't have a romance because she was 4 years old at the time. And then when he eventually came back to Scotland, he sort of worked in the shadows, tried to drum up support, completely failed at that, was eventually betrayed, arrested, and passed over to Edward, who had an example made of him. Edward had Wallace hung, drawn, and quartered. So that's a phrase you might have heard bandied about, but you might not be familiar with the practice. And if you were particularly squeamish, I would say put your fingers in your ears now until I give you the thumbs up. So what that means is Wallace was hung by the neck until very nearly dead. Cut down with just a few seconds to spare. Then, once he'd been allowed to fully regain consciousness, because they didn't want him missing out in the next part, then he was emasculated, his stomach cut open, his intestines pulled out, and burnt in a fire in front of him, well, still attached, of course. So not a very nice way to go. They weren't quite done with him yet. He then had his head cut off, which was stuck in a spike on London Bridge, sorry. This is what happens when you have a picture of Stirling in front of you. And his body cut into 4 pieces. The quarters being sent to the 4 corners of the kingdom to be nailed up and publicly displayed. So this is meant to be an example. And you're safe if you had your fingers in your ear. It's over now. This was meant to be this very public example saying what will happen if you mess with Edward's regime. But it didn't really work off that way. Kind of just pissed everyone off a bit more. Wallace instead became this martyr, and the next man to continue his rebellion would be Robert the Bruce, who would eventually successfully lead the Scots to independence, but that's another story for another day. But that's Wallace. And you can visit that monument, you can climb it, there's a little museum in there, and you can look down on that terrain from the exact same place Wallace did over 700 years ago.
So wild. So wild. Thanks for sharing that battlefield story. And yeah, our battlefield tours to Scotland, if you go to the battlefieldtours.com, you can see that we do have a battlefield tour to Scotland. I think it will be postponed until 2022, but we do go to Stirling and spend an extensive amount of time in Stirling, because you not just have that amazing story and the Wallace Monument, but you also have Stirling Castle as well, and the gateway to the Highlands. It's a place full of history soaked in it. So very, very great rendition of that battle. Thanks, Alistair. And you're right, it is hard to follow up after talking about being hung, drawn, and quartered.
See, I told you, you want to put that one at the end.
Yeah, you're right. Well, it's tough either way.
Yeah, there's no nice time to do it.
We need a
I
whiskey
think-
in our hand for that one.
Oh, well, I don't mind if I do. I believe I might have been committing a faux pas and just sitting with my face on display and unmuted, so I will slip back into the shadows just now.
Thanks. I might ask for your opinion on one more thing before you turn on mute, but the next thing I wanted to talk about is our last top 5 favorite thing, and it's our favorite place. And it was hard to choose what my favorite place was in Scotland. I love the country so much. But if I had to choose one place that I would want everyone to go, anyone that, where your jaw just drops, it's this place in front of you. And it's on the Isle of Harris, and it's among one of the most beautiful beaches on the Scottish Atlantic coast. Actually, arguably, I'd say the entire length of Scotland's Atlantic coast is breathtaking, but particularly in the Outer Hebrides, where Alistair was talking in Whiskey Galore, this area of Scotland is absolutely breathtaking. It's one of those places where you think it's the Caribbean, but without the infrastructure and the people, and perhaps maybe that temperature. But these are white sandy beaches as far as the eye can see. Surrounding areas are it's a truly magical paradise place for hikers, fishing enthusiasts, photographers, wildlife watchers. You can fish here for fresh trout and salmon. You can play a round of golf. You can take a boat trip from here to the World Heritage Site of St. Kilda. You can go diving. You can go kayaking. There's so much this area has to offer. And what I absolutely love about this place is, look at these. There's only 2 people there on that beach. I've been there by myself, and it's just a goosebump type of experience because there's nobody around. It's just absolutely quiet and peaceful, breathtaking. And it's always different. Every time I come here, it's always different because the tide changes, the sand changes, the light changes. It's breathtaking in every single way. What's even cooler about the Isle of Harris, and perhaps the Outer Hebrides in general, there's several ways to get to the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, but one of the coolest ways that I would recommend is flying from Glasgow to the Outer Hebrides with Logan Air. And it's the only landing strip in the world where you land by commercial airplane onto the beach. And so as you land, you see all these breathtaking Caribbean-like islands, and then you actually land on a strip of beach just like this. Really cool experience, and something that's very out of the ordinary. So Liskintyre Beach is but one of many different beaches along this area in the Isle of Harris. And this is also where Harris tweed is made as well. So some of the finest textiles in the world come from this little island. Fine textiles that go to places like Chanel and Adidas and Nike. It's such an amazing place.
It's so amazing that Liskintyre was pinched by the Thai Tourist Board.
Oh, yes. Can you tell us what happened? That's hilarious.
Yeah, the Tourist Board for Thailand got in trouble because they used this big, huge, massive panorama and said, visit Thailand. And then somebody was like, that beach is in Scotland. And they looked into it. They submitted to a competition and they won the 13th best beach in the world, but it was attributed to Thailand. So yeah, it might remind you of the Caribbean, but it reminded some other people of other places.
I think that's so great. I forgot about that story. Oh man. I guess we also have to talk about Glencoe. I would recommend this place for people to go just because it's arguably Scotland's most historic glen. It was recently voted Scotland's most romantic glen. It's arguably Scotland's most famous and scenic glen. A lot to see and do in this area, but perhaps people recognize it mostly for the James Bond film Skyfall was filmed here. A very famous scene when he's when he tells Agent M that this is where he's from, this is actually the destination that they filmed that scene. And Glencoe is in Western Scotland. It lies in the steep-sided Glencoe Valley in the Scottish Highlands. Lots of waterfalls and lots of trails to climb. The Glencoe Folk Museum occupies 18th century thatched cottages. So that's a really cool museum to explore in this area. Lots of displays of local heritage. And of course, the Glencoe Massacre of 1692 took place in this area. There's wildlife in this area as well. You can see red deer wherever you go, golden eagles. And again, this is along the Glen Coast Way, a very famous hiking trail right here in Glencoe. So I had to mention that place because I don't think we would get away with it otherwise. But Alistair, is there any other place in Scotland that you love as a local that you would recommend that I haven't added to this presentation?
I've got a particular fondness for the Forth Rail Bridge. That's just to the north of Edinburgh. You can drive from the city centre to there, or you can take a public bus, and it's about 20 minutes drive or 40 minutes on the bus. And you've got this ancient, well, it dates back to 1890, this huge steel bridge. These three giant hexagons spanning the Firth of Forth, which is like Firth is like a fjord, basically. It's a body of water to the north of Edinburgh. There's also the two more modern road bridges there, and there's a deep sea world, as you will know, and you can also take a boat trip. So this is going between somewhere between a favorite place and favorite experiences. But the boat trip's called the Isle of May. The Maid of the Forth. The Isle of May is an island there. God, it's been a long day. Sorry. And
Thank you.
In my defense to those watching, I just finished a 9-hour shift at work, walked in the door and started on this. So
thank you so much.
Been a fiercely long day. But yeah, the Maid of the Forth is a wonderful little experience because you stop at an island in the middle of the Forth. It takes you about 2 hours, 3 hours or something. Yeah, 3 hours. It's about an hour and a half in the boat. You go under all three of the bridges. You learn all about them. And then on the island, you know, they've got a nice wee cafe. There's all these World War I and II fortifications abandoned. There's a seabird sanctuary. Also, there's a bar on the boat. If anyone wasn't sold yet, there is a bar on the boat.
Oh, be sure to link that on our next presentation, that's for sure. I'm just noticing the time, so we'll hurry this along. Thanks everyone for sticking it through with us. Again, I promise some additional resources that you can take a look at because of course, this is just the beginning of your journey to Scotland. If you'd like, I put our YouTube channel. This is the YouTube channel for the Battlefield Tour. So I'll just take you quickly there. Here's the channel here, but what I would recommend everyone do is watch this video. Lord Charles Bruce was kind enough to chat with me a couple of weeks ago, a month ago now, but he is the great grandson of Lord Bruce, of Robert the Bruce, the great King of Scots, which Alistair mentioned when we were talking about the Battle of Wallace. This is a man who has a direct descendant not only to Robert the Bruce, but to Canada's first Governor General is his great-great-great-grandfather. So he has an amazing connection to Canada as well. I really recommend everyone watch that, especially if you have Scottish ancestry. He talks a lot about how Canadians can do their Scottish ancestral research and how you can plan a trip like that. So that's a really interesting conversation I'd recommend. You can also explore our website, connectiontours.ca/Scotland. Here's a little piece of the website here. So you can take a look. We've got a lot of sample tours on here. We've got lots of different resources for you to check out. We have information on all the types of places you can go. And at the end, you can sign up for our newsletter here if you want to know more about Scotland on a weekly basis. We're always giving discounts away and things like that. There's a podcast that I would recommend everyone take a look at. It's actually hosted by journalist and tour guide Ryan Latto, which is a good friend of Alistair's. He takes us on a wonderful journey on this podcast. So I really wanted to bring attention to it because he's actually talking to people whose lives are very much connected to Scotland. And he talks a lot about different places that you can see in Scotland as well. Really recommend that podcast. Alistair mentioned Whiskey Galore, great book to read if you're looking for a book. Again, it's by Compton Mackenzie. Mackenzie was a passionate Scotsman, and it's based on a true story. To watch, if you're looking for something to watch, the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo has put their 2020 performance online. It's the very first time that they've ever done this. They called it the Tattoo at Home range. And now you can finally have that tattoo experience from the comfort of your own home. It won't be linked for long. So go to edintattoo.co.uk and have your own tattoo experience at home. You can see this performance live as it was. And it's probably the only time in the Edinburgh tattoo history that we'll be able to do this. Soon enough, they'll be going back to regular performances where you have to book months and months and months in advance on a very expensive ticket. So this is really our only chance to see this online. If you're looking for other stuff online while you're surfing, I very much recommend going to visitscotland.com, the tourist board, the official tourist board for Scotland. There's lots of really great resources on there right now because they understand that, you know, we can't travel there yet. But there's new virtual reality features on their website. There's tour guide tales. They even have discovery sounds and audio right now. So immerse yourself in Scotland as much as you can by going to that website. Now, you can enjoy Scotland responsibly when we get back to travel. It's going to be hard to book Scotland. I can't stress that enough. Scotland is a place where there is a lot of demand, but not enough supply. There's not enough accommodation to support the amount of travelers that they get every year. For example, if you're looking for self-catering accommodation, we are fully booked out in 2022. Everyone has already taken the space. So if you're looking at a self-catering family trip to Scotland, I recommend start planning now and booking now for 2023. If you want great pricing, great availability, now's the time to book ahead. You must plan ahead. And that is one of the golden rules that Scotland has when it comes to coming back to Scotland safely and healthy. We also want to press that it's important to support the local tourism industry in Scotland and enjoy slow travel. A lot of discounts for being eco-conscious and socially responsibility in Scotland is important. For example, bringing an eco cup or like a reusable cup to your coffee shop in Scotland, more likely than not, you're going to get a discount on that coffee. As I mentioned before, at the Love It Hotel, if you use public transit or you take a bike or you hike there, you'll get a discount in that regard as well. So it's important to understand that Scotland's really embracing a slower travel, and they're going to give discounts and reward us for that. All right, guys, we did it. It's time for the Scott giveaway. Yay! So we work with the Scottish Fine Soaps Company. It's a company based in Scotland. Again, it's just one of those companies that we love because they embrace supporting the community locally. They use local flora in Scotland, sustainably source perfumes and minerals in their products. So today, a lucky participant in our presentation that the Orillia Public Library will choose will get a package from us, from the Scottish Fine Soaps Company, delivered to their house. They will also get a 10% discount on all of our custom tours to Scotland in 2023. But for the rest of you, every single person in this presentation, we're giving you 5% off all of our custom tour products with Connection Tours in Scotland in the year 2023. So if you're booking something, a custom travel experience, it can be anything. It can be a whiskey tour, a golf tour, it can be a performance tour, it can be a tour where you're exploring your family history, perhaps walking in your ancestral footsteps. Come to us and use the code ConnectScott23 in your email or phone call with us, and we will provide you with a 5% discount, which is huge, huge stuff. Thank you, Connection Tours, for providing that with us. And again, at the bottom of this presentation, here's the link, bit.ly/supporting Scotland, for you to have access to this presentation. And we did it. Yay. Thank you again, everybody, for having us. This is so much fun.
Thank you so much for this is incredible. Like, I just want to go tomorrow. I really wish we could, but thank you so much, Sam and Alistair. It was incredible. It was an amazing presentation, and I knew it would be. So really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions that you could send me with chat, and I can ask Sam for you on your behalf?
I'll stop the share.
Can we have the connection again for keep downloading the video?
Oh, yes. It's bit.ly.
Yeah.
Actually, I can put it back on the screen. Is that okay with you, Daniel?
Yeah, please.
That's fine. I'm also going to type it into the chat so people can actually probably click that link.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
There it is down there, bit.ly/supporting Scotland. Woohoo!
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. Sam, someone wants to know, what does self-catering mean?
Self-catering means that you would have your own kitchen, your own utensils. There wouldn't be anyone there to make your bed in the morning or clean your sheets. There's usually laundry provided. Actually, that's quite stunning to me that a lot of the self-catering in Scotland has laundry facilities, but it's more so for travelers that want to be a little bit more independent, want to cook their own food, don't necessarily need check-in or check-out. For our travelers who go on a self-catering holiday, you get all the information before you travel. So you make your way over to the property, and the property manager is there to greet you on day one with the keys, shows you around, usually has towels and shampoo and a hair dryer and things like the basic necessities, but then leaves you to it. And he or she will leave you instructions to leave the keys somewhere when you leave the property. So you have the whole place to yourself.
Any other questions? Well, if you think of something tomorrow, you can always email me at the library. It's Jane, or just info@orilliapubliclibrary.ca, and I can ask Sam on your behalf and give you the answer. So thank you so much for participating tonight, and thank you again, Sam and Alistair. It was incredible. I'm so glad that you joined us.
It was a pleasure.
Be safe,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.